J.J. Watt, former Houston Texans great. I don't know if any of you remember him, but who recently retired. And there's been a lot of people postulating, myself included, that maybe JJ would pull an Ndamukong Suh and come back during the season to a playoff contender. And people keep asking about this. He keeps saying no, he won't. But I feel like on Part of My Take, where he was with PFT commenter and Big Cat, I think he gave the most compelling reason yet for why he's definitely not coming back. We'll get to that about midway through here. Just I served up the best of this hour-long interview, the things that intrigued me the most that didn't get too meatheadish. We can do a separate podcast where he talks specifically about his workouts, because I geeked out like a meathead on that stuff, but I don't know if that's exactly what everybody wants to hear. So we'll start off with JJ's assessment of the Texans trade with Arizona. The guys asked JJ who won that trade.
I think the Texans are basically saying to their fan base, hey, we've gone through a very rough period. Now we're going for it. Now we're actually doing it. Now we're going all in. We're trying to win, and we're trying to win now. We hired D'Amico. We got these 2 draft picks. It's going to be great. Arizona seems to be saying the opposite a little bit. They seem to be saying, hey, we're loading up. We're getting a ton of picks. We're moving back. We're doing these things. We're going to really go after it in the next few years. So,
yeah. So I think that's fair enough. That I think there are people. This is what I don't like. When people criticize the trade up to number 3 based on trade value, they have valid points. Okay, and if you have the argument that it was really a package deal because they were just flat out going for it, they wanted to figure out a way to get both C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson. I can say, okay, that's fine if that's the compromise. I get it. It was an aggressive trade. One way or the other, it was an aggressive trade. I don't like when people go a step further and say, well, the Texans overpaid and they leveraged their future. Because then you've betrayed that you absolutely have no clue what the Texans' future actually looks like. And you're ignoring all of the capital that they got from the Deshaun Watson trade. So I'm okay. I like to say I'm okay with the trade if you call it a trade for Will Anderson, and it was way more than most people would pay, but it was an aggressive trade for somebody that they feel super confident about, because all of those picks, whether you want to say it's 3 or 4, depending on the swaps and all that, the picks that you gave up, you've got a 50-50 shot of those guys working out. So you get a couple of guys versus one Will Anderson, who's a top 3 pick in the draft. It's an aggressive move, and I don't think you have to do it to placate the fan base. I think you do it to placate a team that wants to be good and can trust more so than with other prospects. More so when I actually, and I said this all along, you guys know that I switched from Tyree Wilson to Will Anderson about the day of the draft. Actually, I will say, I think that of the top 3 defensive prospects, Jalen Carter, Tyree Wilson, and Will Anderson, including when I liked Tyree Wilson, I still felt like Will Anderson had the higher floor. There's much less of a chance that he's not going to be good compared to those other defensive guys. Or if you take top 3 picks from various other draft years and generations, that's the price you're paying. It's like paying for an insurance policy. You're paying a premium to get up to a guy that you feel really good about. So that part of it, I'm fine. If you think they overpaid, then so be it. But just put it in the proper context that the Texans overpaid, but they've still got a lot in their coffers for next year. This part was interesting, and it's somewhat draft related, because the guys read JJ a couple of the negative reviews, and the don't pay attention to the whole take as much as JJ chuckling as soon as he hears a certain name. Oh, and this is based on when JJ was drafted, and JJ heard booze.
I don't know if you know any of these, but a guy named Chris Baldwin on the Houston Culture Map wrote an article saying Texans will rue the night they took Pizza Boy J.J. Watt over Nick Fairley, Houston lover.
I do recall.
Yeah. So, yeah. Chris Baldwin, who wrote the infamous story for the Culture Map, Houston Culture Map. Chris Baldwin was always cool to me. He hated Mike Meltzer for some reason. I don't know exactly why, but he liked me and hated Mike Meltzer when Mike Meltzer and I were co-hosts on the show forever. Chris Baldwin was writing a story. Like many people, he was skeptical of J.J. Watt. Mike Meltzer from the very beginning thought that the JJ Watt pick was a very good pick. And as many people have pointed out on draft night, I think Steph Stradley pointed this out the other day. It wasn't like the whole draft party was booing JJ. It was a pretty vocal group of people near the cameras, and that's what you hear. So I don't abide that like the entire city was booing JJ. The part that I this was a little bit depressing, and I felt bad for a young JJ Watt. This is what it was like after the draft, after all the excitement, when JJ realized that the at least a portion of Texans fans were not fans of his.
So draft night, it's fascinating. I mean, you get drafted, you're in New York City, obviously you do all the media and everything around it, and then you go back to your hotel room and you can't, I mean, the adrenaline is just flowing through you. You can't sleep. I mean, your whole life literally just changed. So I sat there in bed and you just scroll through it all, you kind of read it, and I'm sitting there like jacked up. I'm excited. I just finished all my media talking all positive about Houston, and then I'm laying there in bed just scrolling through my phone like, wait a second.
Yeah.
Nobody fucking likes me.
Yeah. Why do these people not like me? Yeah.
This whole city.
This whole city. That's social media in a nutshell, by the way. It's all it takes is 5 people to hate you on social media, and they're like a SEAL team. It feels like, a SEAL team is really good because it takes a limited number of people, or any of the special ops. They're really good at making it seem like a dozen people are 50 people by shooting from all directions. And that's what a bunch of people on social media can do. They can make it feel like the whole world is against you. I want to address this real quick. I'm curious what trade chart math is being used to call that trade so unbalanced. By the math, as I understand it, the trade was slanted towards the Cardinals by maybe 5%, which is pretty negligible. The big difference is, are you trading for a quarterback or are you trading for a position player? So when you get into the top of the trade charts, the values all break down to hell. Like, it's all over the place. But when it comes to non-quarterbacks, that was the second highest price ever paid for a non-quarterback, but it was behind Julio Jones. So, like, Julio Jones, I don't know. Do people largely regard the Julio Jones pick by the Falcons as a bad trade, or as an exorbitant price? I mean, it's an exorbitant price, and the Falcons didn't get really good immediately from that trade, but Julio Jones ends up being an awesome player. Now that's the outlier, but that's generally the fact that it wasn't a quarterback is what sets it apart. Back to JJ, damn it. No trades needed for JJ. So this is what JJ did with all of that negative energy.
It did for me trigger like okay, I'm gonna show these people. I'm gonna come in and I'm gonna give them every single reason to root for me, and that's kind of my goal, is to overturn these fans and make them understand and get them on my side. And it kind of became a challenge of mine, and I'm very fortunate that they were open-minded enough to switch and come along with me, because Houston is literally like family now. I was just there last week. I'm going back there tomorrow, and Houston truly feels like family every time I step in that city.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't catch that part, that he was going back tomorrow. I don't know if this interview was yesterday or 2 days ago. I get the sense. One question: does anybody know this? I've never wanted to ask JJ this myself. Whenever I have talked to JJ, I try really, really, really hard not to be a media guy or curious at all, because I know he's got 400 million people coming at him with stuff like that all the time. But does he fly private, or does he just I don't know. It's hard. He's still big enough that it's hard to be inconspicuous. As far as the tact he took in trying to win the entire city over, I don't know. Do you think if he hadn't gotten booed on draft night, that he would have been less aggressive in pursuing the whole, the persona of JJ, like the John Cena persona? I don't know. I feel like he would have anyway, because he's pretty savvy about but it was good to have that persona, not just obviously all the actual football stuff, but, and I think he would have done the charity work regardless, but he very much amped up that John Cena image. I think he was going to do it regardless. I do think that having a chip on your shoulder, but without channeling it negatively, that's a pretty fine distinction there. It might be a good lesson for younger players in that, all right, have the chip on your shoulder, but you can't have you always got to, if you have a chip on your shoulder, I think it's important to always see, play it out in your mind. Okay, what happens ultimately when whatever is driving me, whenever I achieve that goal that the chip caused me to achieve, is it actually going to do anything about that chip? Or like, am I going to prove people wrong who I think I'm going to prove wrong? And, will people apologize? Am I going to get to go on Jerry Springer and say, you thought I was all flat, but now I'm all that? Like, you have to, usually the answer is no, it's not. It's not going to accomplish what you think it's going to accomplish. So if you turn it into, okay, I've got a chip on my shoulder, but I'm going to actually just like not worry about what people said in the past. I'm going to try to win them over and be cool with it. That's a pretty good life lesson, and a certain level. It's a level of perspective and maturity that I don't think that I certainly didn't have it. There's still people I need that I need to right the wrongs of my past. I'll tell you, Clint Eastwood on their ass. So JJ was asked about the city of Houston. PFT commenter, like with some pretty mild criticism of Houston and the traffic. I don't think he brought up the weather or the heat, but this is how JJ responded as to whether he could be an ambassador to Houston.
No, I can't ambassador for the traffic or the humidity. Those are the two things I will say. The Chamber of Commerce there needs to get to work. But for food and fans, Houston is the greatest city, is the most underrated food city in possibly the world.
Yeah. So underrated food city in possibly the world. And as far as fans too, that's a whole, that's subjective. Of course, we're the best fans, but underrated food city. Mind you, he is just coming back from England here. England, by comparison, if he's going from England to Houston and looking for Tex-Mex, then he's 100% going to be happy to get back in Houston, or for pretty much anything else. I do think that is one thing that you talk about, making your own natural resources. Like countries, this is what a lot of tiny Asian nations have been able to do in the Pacific Rim. They don't have natural resources, so they create their own resources in terms of technical expertise, or various facets of education. You got to create your own resources. I think Houston's done a really, really good job of creating their own resources. And I would include in that, because in food, like you got a great restaurant scene. What are you going to do? That's awesome. Like you just created your own attraction and natural resource, and something nice that people say about the city. Likewise, I think the bayous, they've done a good job of, in recent years. Since I moved here in 2002, the bayous have gone from a place where maybe you might see some random kids fishing in a bayou and you'd have to go warn them not to eat whatever they plucked out of the bayou, to now, like, and you certainly wouldn't want to walk along a lot of the bayous back then, where now they're lush, both flood control mechanisms, but also nice parks. And so kudos to Houston for that. This right here, this is what I had promised you guys. What's this? You're not a fan of beans on toast? Oh, yeah, that's a big English, the monarchy thing there, right? I kind of like beans on toast, actually. It's a complete protein. You get all your glycine, your lysine, everything you need in beans on toast. So I'm kind of a fan of beans on toast. Okay, this is the part I promised. If you had any kind of fantasies that JJ was going to step back into the limelight after just taking a few months off to think about it, I feel like this is the most compelling reason, and it jives with everything you know about JJ Watt. The most compelling reason that JJ is not going to make an Ndamukong Suh type comeback with a playoff caliber team in November this season.
I can tell you right now for a fact I'm not coming back. For me to play this season, I would have to be training right now. And my body, if I went out there to play right now, it would not perform. I haven't run since the last game of the season. So I could not physically do it.
Yeah. And this is after he's had a conversation with these guys about, how he's working out now and what he's been up to. He won't go over 405 when he's squatting, which is stupid. Like this is what happens for the 2 years after you're done. You tell yourself, oh, I'm going to take it easy. But the problem is your definition of taking it easy still means like, okay, well, I'll just run until I don't quite feel like puking. Or maybe I'll run until I feel like puking, but I don't puke. And then when I squat and when I bench, I won't go any higher than 365 on the bench or 405 on the squat. And then after a couple of years, you realize, well, why would I ever put 405 pounds on a squat rack after I've had 19 knee surgeries? That's the dumbest thing ever. So I think he'll work that way down to 315 and then to 275 on the squat eventually. But right now he's at 405. He says he used to do sets for reps with 585 or more. He wasn't sure exactly where they were. Oh, yeah, he used to cap itself at 585. I think at one point the most he ever squatted was 695 or up around that region, whatever it was pretty insane. But he talked about how the insanity of those workouts is like what made him great, but also likely what caused him to get injured. And he's open about, I think, being conflicted about it. And I know he was conflicted about it while he was playing, was he didn't know how to play without working out like that. There's a fear of, okay, what am I? If I'm this good when I work out this way, I can't take a step backwards and try to work out in a lesser intensity, but hope that I stay healthy. And yet the advice he gives TJ Watt now is, listen, man, like, you can do whatever you want. You can impress people in the weight room all you want. If you're not on the football field, it doesn't do anything for you. So you got to be super careful and not do all the stupid things I did. I try to tell younger guys this all the time, but because I was that way, and I ended up, I think, having injuries later in my career because I never took any breaks, and I was psychotically doing my legs as heavy as possible 12 months out of the year, including the last month of the season. I think over time it caught up to me. But it's just, it's like being addicted to a drug. It's a positive drug that's, it works, and it's legal. There's nobody going to come in and give you a pee test for squatting too heavy. And it just, over time, you start to break down. So he's not coming back. As far as Giannis Antetokounmpo, I should have pulled the clip. I think most of you have probably seen it. After Giannis was eliminated from the playoffs, a reporter asked him if he thought the season was a failure. And Giannis kind of went off on the guy, talking about how, hey, failure is a necessary step towards your ultimate achievement. Nobody takes successively positive steps and wins every step along the way. You got to have some failures to have that ultimate success. JJ agrees with him. I get from the sense of their conversation that Big Cat didn't agree with Giannis, or at least criticized him for it. But this is JJ's take on that.
I absolutely agree with Giannis's comments. I completely see people on the other side, and I understand why somebody would say that's not the winning mentality. But in terms of, as an athlete, how you have to mentally live your life to not put yourself into a really, really shitty way, which I can say I've been in before. I love his perspective, and I love the way that he went about it.
Yeah, and then he went on to link. Then I'll link this. I'll link the Nashville interview with Greg Cosell. I'll link the interview with JJ on Pardon My Take. I don't think they have a standalone one. You got to scroll to it. But it's really good. He gets into just how devastating it is emotionally, and how much he felt like he let down the city. I'm going to play part of that clip right now because I want to address some of my sports radio cohorts, some of my colleagues at Sports Radio 610 who are skeptical of this attitude by JJ.
I really put myself through the ringer every time I got injured. Like, man, fans are looking at you and your teammates are looking at you, and everybody wants you to be out there and you're not. That shit is very tough.
Yeah, and I remember one of his last injuries, he apologized to the fans. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody that I work with had said that he felt like that was disingenuous, because why would he apologize to the fans? And all I could say is because you genuinely feel guilty about the fact that you're collecting a lot of money and not out there working. Like most guys like that are good dudes have a work ethic where Will Anderson was like excited. Will Anderson in that clip on the Texans Instagram was over the moon to be actually a working man in America. Like, he walked in and he's like, this is my workplace. That's really cool. Because when you're in college, yeah, you're getting NIL money, but that never feels like real money. Frankly, it feels a little bit like a scam sometimes. You're like, I never had NIL. They weren't giving me the $100 handshakes at Cornell back in the day, but but like, it always, endorsement money and everything, it never feels like real money. But like showing up and getting an actual paycheck, used to be in physical form, but now auto credited to your account. Like, that's, man, you're a working man. So likewise, if you have pride in working a job that you're still getting paid for a job you're not actually doing, and people have expectations, it sucks. And with JJ, he went over it he went through it over and over and over again. So like that part of it, and he makes a bunch of points, and each step along the way, he understands and is 100% grateful for the fact that he was able to do everything that he did. He's not asking anybody to cry him a river. It was just, it's emotionally difficult after a while. And I think that's another reason he probably doesn't want to go through that again either. Some team signing him, and then if he gets injured and misses the misses the playoffs or what have you, it's one more step in that cycle where it's really, really hard for him to stay healthy there at the end. One last little bit, just because this was gruesome and horrific and yet kind of impressive, was him describing when he tore his pec back in the 2019 season. You'll recall he would later go on to come back and play in the playoffs.
My pec injury, I did not know what happened. So I tore my pec on one play. Josh Jacobs' knee hit me right in the bicep, threw my pec back, pec torn. I didn't know. Zero pain. Literally clean off the bone, zero pain. I went to line up for the next play and put my hand in the ground, and I couldn't lift it to put it in the ground. So I stood up and in 2-point stance for the next play. I went to run and my arm wouldn't move. And then I came off this side. I looked at the doctor and he goes, "Yeah, your pec's literally gone."
Oh,
yeah. And that's about what it seemed like that, right? It was. We're gonna get to Pat McAfee here in a minute. Because Pat McAfee, I'm going to confess, I was a little skeptical of his motivation for going to ESPN, and I'm less skeptical of it now. I still think it's the wrong move for him, but let's clean up some of these JJ questions. Ironically enough, it's JJ Stagg. Oh, we're still caught. Yeah, we talked about the trade chart. We didn't deserve JJ. Come on, Austin designs things. Of course we deserve J. We deserve everything. Let me tell you another thing, Austin. There's another thing I don't like. When people say we don't deserve dogs. We created dogs, all right? Like whenever you say like, oh, we don't deserve dogs, dogs would still be running around in the wild as wolves or wolf-like creatures, is scrounging and starving to death on the frozen tundra and all that good stuff, if humans hadn't selectively bred dogs to be what they are. So it's the exact opposite. We believe dogs, or we deserved dogs because we made dogs, and then we also deserve JJ because we drafted him. Whatever circumstances led us to being number 11 that year, that was all on us. Not just as not just the football team, but the city itself. He used to rep Wheels Up, which is a charter. Oh, good call. So thank you, Austin. I take back my vitriol that I threw at you. So he probably does charter. Yeah. Let's see. The national media can say what they want. Look at the moves Houston has made this offseason. We'll set up Stroud for success as a rookie with the aggressiveness Nick showed. We may add a DT and a wide receiver. Yeah, and even if they don't, then I think that by adding the guys that they did, pretty much like one at each position group. Off-ball linebacker. I forgot. It's not a 3-4. I can call it just a linebacker. Linebacker, they added a few guys that can compete, but there's more competition amongst veteran players there. And I'm good with where they are. I don't expect them to necessarily, I don't think they're going to try to trade for Quinnen Williams or anything. Don't get me wrong. I'd be excited as hell if they did. But I think a lot of it is going to be about the development of the rookies this year. I would love to see Miko get JJ and Andre to come in as consultants to help coach up the team's chemistry. I think Andre is going to be around. I mean, he has been from the entire process. Oh, I think on draft night, leave that up there. On day 2 of the draft, I was doing the broadcast with Mark and John from the stadium. And I went in to grab some food with Mark from the team cafeteria, or whatever they call it, the performance center, during one of the breaks. I walked in and I was looking down at the table and I saw, oh, there's CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. That's cool. Still wearing the same suits that they'd been wearing at the press conference like 4 hours earlier. It's not fun wearing a suit as a big man. I feel bad for Will Anderson. But I just shook hands with those guys real quick, told them they had crushed the press conference, which they did. And they were, of course, very cordial and polite. And I talked to them for just a real brief minute. And went up, grabbed some coffee and some water, came back, and I hadn't even realized that the guy they were sitting with was Andre Johnson. Because you can imagine Andre's not there. I didn't recognize Andre by him, talking loudly or anything. So Andre is sitting there just eating with a couple other former Texans and those guys a few hours after the press conference. So Andre was there on draft night. Andre got as excited as I've like Andre's version of excitement when it isn't like angry football excitement, like I just made a touchdown or we just won a football game. The most excited I've seen him off the field was after the Texans made that trade up for Will Anderson. Like I think that level of excitement that he had was palpable. So Andre's, very much back in the fold and invested in the team. I think D'Amico is going to probably make it that much tighter. Andre was there. Every time I've seen D'Amico in like a non-football setting where we do some of these other functions, Andre's there. So like Andre's going to be a part. I think JJ's going to be a citizen of the world, at least for now, because he's over in England promoting Burnley, the soccer club. I think a lot of teams sometimes bring in a celebrity or an athlete thinking like, oh yeah, we'll get this big boost and they'll be good for PR. And then the celebrities kind of under deliver on that side of it. JJ's going to latch on to the delivering that side of it. So, but I think he probably will be around a little bit. I don't know exactly what he was doing in Houston recently. So maybe he was visiting the team, talking to the rookies or something. And, D'Amico and JJ crossed just 1 year together, right? So that's, I think that's very much a possibility. Man knows the entire chemical makeup of a bean, doesn't know what a glottal stop is. That's right. That's how you learn though, man. I didn't know what a glottal stop was. I asked you, you told me, and now I don't remember what it was either. JJ might be better off not having gone overboard on workouts. Yeah, that's pretty much what he was hinting at when he was talking to the guys. It's a good interview. As I said, I will link it. I wonder if changing JJ from an interior rusher to a primary edge rusher might have impacted his career's length. The torquing on his back and core from bending around the edge couldn't have been good. That's a really, that's an interesting way to put it. I'd never thought of it that way because I think usually you think you move a guy outside because it's less wear and tear and it's less beating up. But you're right. It is a more of when you've got to take on a combo block, if you're going down to a knee or whatever, it's not the same level. It's not the same angles and speed and force as when you're trying to bend around the edge. That's really interesting. I'm going to pronounce it Blade. I apologize, Blade, if that's not the correct